Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order this called meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for November 29th, 2021, beginning at 5:13 p.m. The Board of Trustees on November 29th, 2021, beginning at 5:13 p.m., will convene in closed session pursuant to Sections 551.071 through 551.084 of the Texas Government Code in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act for the topics set forth on our agenda. We will reconvene in open meeting at approximately 6 p.m. At this time, I will reconvene into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for November 29th, 2021, beginning at 6:28 p.m. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join David Wilbanks in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Now we come to our open forum for agenda items. As stated on the posted agenda, members of the public who desire to address the board regarding an item on this agenda are required to register at www.aisd.net/board-meeting-speaker-request no later than 3 p.m. the day of the board meeting. Mrs. Benjamin, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding agenda items?
No, ma'am, we have no requested speakers.
Okay, then we will move on. Next on our agenda is our action item. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mason. This evening, we bring for your board consideration a resolution regarding a one-time wage payment of $500 for full-time employees, $500 for substitutes and AISD temporary employees who have worked at least 20 days, and $250 for substitutes and AISD temporary employees who have worked less than 20 days for your consideration.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Any questions? Any discussions? If I do, please raise your hand since we have no buttons. Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Mays. At this time, I move to approve the following resolution, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Arlington Independent School District. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Arlington Independent School District is authorized by Texas Education Code Section 11.151 to govern and oversee the management of the public schools in the district, and whereas the board, through its employment policies, may specify the terms of district employment or delegate to the superintendent the authority to determine the terms of employment with the district as authorized by Texas Education Code Section 11.1513C, and whereas the board is authorized by the Texas Education Code Section 45.105 to expend funds of the district for purposes necessary in the conduct of the public schools as determined by the board, and whereas the board recognizes that the vast majority of district employees have been called upon to go above and beyond to ensure the success of district operations, and whereas the vast majority of district employees have worked diligently in adverse conditions to continue to provide an education to the district students, and whereas the board finds it necessary to recognize and show appreciation for the ongoing courage and sacrifice of district employees and is doing so by providing a one-time payment for employees, and whereas the public purpose for this one-time payment is to retain employees, promote staff morale, show appreciation, and to properly reward employees for performing under the additional hardships caused by the pandemic, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Arlington Independent School District. Resolved, the board hereby recognizes and appreciates all district employees who have gone above and beyond to ensure the success of the district and its students. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Arlington Independent School District authorizes a one-time net wage payment of, if employed by November 29th, 2021, of $500 for full-time employees, $500 for substitutes and AISD temporary employees who have worked at least 20 assignment days this school year, and $250 for substitutes and AISD temporary employees who have worked less than 20 assignment days this school year. Resolve, the board authorizes and directs the superintendent to provide a one-time net wage payment as described for employees. Resolve, the Board of Trustees hereby, 1, determines that these payments serve a public purpose, 2, retains sufficient control over the expenditures to ensure a public purpose is served, and 3, is confident the district will receive a return benefit. Resolve, this resolution only applies to this one-time net wage payment to employees. This resolution does not establish ongoing policy, and the Arlington Independent School District is under no obligation to provide any additional payments beyond those contemplated by this resolution this 29th day of November 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Once again, I have a motion by Mr. Chapa. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. McMorrow. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will vote by roll call. I will start to my left. Dr. Reich?
Aaron Rice, vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrow, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Motion passes in the affirmative. Thank you. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of my colleagues on this board who wholeheartedly are 100% with showing any means of appreciation to our entire staff that's applicable based on the resolution that we read. We really do appreciate everything that our staff is doing. We appreciate AISD, and we appreciate the engagement and the impact that you are all having on our students in AISD. So thank you very much to all of my colleagues. Okay, now we move to our discussion item. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. And this time we'll move to our strategic plan development and continue that work. We're still on target to bring the strategic plan for board consideration next week, so we will move into our work session if that's acceptable.
All right, thank you.
So we are going to, tonight, we have with us some design team members that have joined us, so we're thankful for those folks that have been part of the process. And our goal tonight, and Dr. Kowalski, did you want to say anything? I'm sorry, okay. I want to acknowledge the folks that have been part of the facilitation. Mitzi and I are here tonight, but Crystal and Leah have also been a part of the facilitation and done a lot of great work with these teams over the past few months. So you know that we met together in August, and we launched, and we said this is what we're going to do over the next few months with the board, and we talked through that. And since then, we have been hard at work. So tonight, our goal is to review the strategic design process that we've gone through, which included community engagement, as we talked about, and then creating strategy-specific results, a timeline, a 5-year timeline, and next week, you'll be able to see the final, but tonight we wanted to get your feedback on what's in there. And so we do have design team members. And as we go into the teaming here, right now, they'll introduce themselves and tell you what part of the process they were a part of. And that's what we're going to do next. We've been really just honored to have so many folks be part of this work. And so you're gonna hear about that, and we're gonna take about 3 minutes. I think they've actually already assigned you some roles. Before you came over, they said they know you well, they know what roles you would be good at. So we're gonna take 3 minutes or less, because design team, whoever the communications person is, if you finish your teaming in less than 3 minutes, just put up your check mark because you're ready to go. What is your team name, what are your team roles, and what are your norms? And then you can find those team folders also linked on your agenda. Okay, 3 minutes, go. Okay, let's see, what do we have here? Team leaders, please raise your hands. Team leaders, can I see your hands, team leaders? Yes, team leader, okay, perfect, great. Communications, where are you? Very good, so you're going to help keep us on track tonight by, yes, just like Mr. Martin just did, holding up the, letting us know with the check mark when you're finished every time. And then, timekeeper, where are you? Okay, awesome. Dr. Cavazos, do you always?
They nominate me for that.
Oh, okay, perfect, great. Awesome. That's right. So you will be keeping time for your group, and we are going to stay on time. So you'll actually set the time for every one of the activities as we move forward. All right, so what I put up here is the list of the design team members. We had 70-ish folks that were involved in the design team, including some of the people at your table, which you just met. And it was very exciting to have all of these different perspectives involved in this process. Over time, we're going to give you a little bit of background about what has been done so far. But you'll remember that when we met back in August, I think it was the last day of August, that we met, or close to it, in the board workshop, and we talked about these phases and these stages of the process. We have gone through each of these stages now. So we went through the community engagement stage where we did some summits, focus groups, a survey, etc., and I'll show you a little bit about that. We did the design team session that we included, and several folks in the room are nodding because you were part of that. And we came out of that process with our strategies. We went through the create phase already, where we ended up with specific results aligned to the strategies. And then in what we call the lead phase, we created a 5-year timeline. You're going to see all of that work tonight that all of these folks have been involved in creating based on the community engagement report. So it's been, I would say, a heavy lift, but a really exciting time too in terms of the collaboration, the input, and the work that's gone into it. And as you know, we, as Dr. Cavazos already mentioned, we are on track to bring you the strategic plan next week. We talked about these board roles, and some of you have been part of different pieces that we have had in the process. And then here's some great pictures of what's happened in the process, and just some of the action shots of the work. So the first phase was the community engagement, and I'm going to just let you see. I don't know how many of you were part of this. Mitzi, maybe you can cue it up for us, the video. But part of the community engagement process when we did summits, actually in this room, is we brought in students, and we had student panels, and every single summit we had students here. And so we ended up talking to around 12 or 15 students over the course of the summits and got some great insight from them, information from them. They shared their insights, and the community really appreciated that. We also took clips in this same video and shared it with the design team. So we were able to get the student voice in on the design team, and we had students on the design team. So we had the student voice in both of those ways, as well as in the focus groups. So we'll show you a little clip of the, is it gonna cue up? Maybe, maybe not. If not, we'll share it with you. Well, the students had great things to say. And we will share the video with you at some point. But while we're waiting for the video, let's just answer a couple of quick questions, and that is just thinking from the community. Oh, and by the way, on your agenda, you also have linked the full community engagement report. So we took all the data from those 3 sources, the summits, the focus groups, and the survey, aggregated that data, and shared back with you the community engagement report. We also shared that community engagement report with the design team. So when I say there were 70 or so people involved in the design team work, also you had over 3,000 people that contributed in terms of their input even prior to the design team starting. And so all of that was integrated in. So so we had, in your community engagement report, you'll see we had 3,500 people. That's a lot of people to respond to the survey. It was amazing to get that kind of input. We had over 137 people come to the summits over the days, and then we had 61 people participate in focus groups. So we get this data to triangulate between folks that will come in person, especially during these times, to share, versus those that feel more comfortable completing something online, but you get as much broad-based input as possible. And then the focus groups are selected folks that represent a homogeneous group. The reason you do it that way is because people have different perspectives in different contexts, right? So as a result, and this is just a very quick snapshot from the community engagement report, but for example, we asked this question of all of these groups. And so what are your highest hopes for students as a result of their time in school? The same question that we asked at the board workshop, remember, when we met together in August. And so what you can see here, and again, this is just a quick snapshot, but what you see here from the survey, color-coded by type of stakeholder, because those representatives are shown there, you can see that the number one thing that came back was that students would have the ability to communicate well with others. That was the number one response. 75% of the respondents chose that response. But you can also see it broken down by students, family members, and current or former district employees. So you can kind of see the data there and how it will show up. In the summit, we did not, of course, have folks characterized by their stakeholder group. So those summit responses are all blanket responses, if you will, are all stakeholder groups. And then the focus groups, of course, were characterized by stakeholder group. One of the things I find really interesting is that you see a difference in what central office staff responded, for example, if you look at the colors, versus principals or versus students. For example, students thought that real world experience and relevance was the most important piece. So that's why we do focus groups, just so you make sure you get different voices. So that's just a snapshot of the community engagement. That report then was used by the design team to begin to formulate the plan. So here's the 3 questions at your table that I would love for you to think through for just a couple minutes. And that is, why do you feel that student voice is so critical? We mentioned we had it in the panels and in the design team. Why is having community input so critical? And then the third is, from your design team members that were there, how was the community input incorporated into the process? Okay, timekeepers, let's go 3 minutes, basically 1 minute on each of these topics. It's a warm up. Why? So the first question, which group would like to share? Why is student voice so critical in this process of strategic planning? Yes?
There are consumers.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So, they're literally the reason that we're all here, right? So it's important to hear from them. And man, it was really powerful. He wasn't able to get that video to work. I'm not sure why, but it is linked to your agenda. And so I would encourage you to watch it because it's a few minutes. It's just some clips. We actually have the full video of all the panel. But the students were amazing in what they shared and how insightful they were. So it's great to get their perspective. And that I think had a big influence on the design team as well. Why is having community input so critical? Who wants to share? Yeah.
Because we need their insight.
Okay. Yeah, and in the process, and we talked about this at the board workshop, having community input, one, it makes your plan actionable. So you can create a plan with educators and the board and leadership, but without community input, it's not as actionable. With community input, you're more likely, because it is a symbiotic relationship, it takes everybody. So having community input is really critical. And then I heard you talking about how we use data in the process. So that was kind of the engage stage, and then leading into the design team. We shared that information with the design team. You'll remember at the board workshop also that when we looked back, you had several things that were had already been created in the district. And those were not, just, okay, let's start over. We actually used those pieces in the design team. They did a process much like what we did in the board workshop, where they looked at all of the pieces that were already there, plus the community engagement as they moved into creating strategies. So this is just a quick reminder of those pieces that were shared with them. And then here is a video that will tell you a little bit about the process that we think will work.
Let me just get the volume. Give me just a second.
Okay.
I'm usually not this technology challenged.
There it is.
It's still not loud enough though.
Can you all even hear it?
It's on set.
It's what?
Is the unit on?
It's on here now. I'm just trying to get it.
So, without kind of adding any
Okay. You still leave photos here? Is that a thing? Okay. Alright. Still leave
So, without kind of adding any undue stress to you, the future of the district depends on you. When we did our first 2 strategic plans, we knew that it would lead to transformation, but it leads to much more. It leads to the engagement of our community, our staff, our students,
to really inspire them for big change in the school district.
It's important for us to be very intentional about not only the direction that we're going, but communicating that plan to our stakeholders.
We have a hand in shaping the next 5 years of our system, which is really powerful. The facilitators have said a couple of times, you're chosen for a reason to be here.
The partnership with Engage to Learn is awesome. It really is, because it has really been a partnership, something that we've grown in together. Engage to Learn has been a critical piece not only of our teaching framework, but also of the strategic planning process.
It's really important to step out of the reactive mode, to look forward, look into the future, and say, where do we want to be? How do we get there? And build strategy around that, design strategy around that.
So now embarking on this third strategic plan, I really enjoy this process where we engage more people, engage the community, engage our students, our staff, to make sure that everyone's voice is represented, but in a collective way.
Everything that we are doing and everybody's focus is wanting to get past this learning loss, moving towards that equity and getting students back and getting them back and beyond where they were before.
The National Equity Project defines equity as reducing the predictability of who succeeds and who fails. I know this district will help bring that. There's an intentional focus to make sure that all of our students have equity and access.
At the beginning, when we went around and everyone just kind of shared their role, why they were here, it was really cool because I think we're getting a lot of representation in the room and a lot of diversity.
I have 2 kids in the district, and it's a big deal because not all districts do strategic plans in this way. So for Arlington to have the vision of looking forward 5 years and saying, this is where we'd like to be, I think it's really neat to be a part of.
Student voice is absolutely necessary, and we know that the insight, the things that resonate with them, the gaps that they see in our system, and the teaching and learning, and the successes that they've had, the aspirations that they have, all those things are really reinforcing to this process, because it tells us that ultimately we're serving them.
Everybody's voice matters, and it's very important for the student body to be here to represent the students and how they feel. Everybody gets to listen to how our learning is, how our environment is, how we feel about certain things.
Now that we have so many opportunities for kids to engage in that didn't even exist back in 2013, how do we make sure now that they're not only enrolling in those programs, but that they persist in them and that they're actually successful in them, and that success is equitable across the system and not dependent upon your background. It'll be really cool to see what happens over the next several sessions and where we actually land.
We can look back 5 years from now and say, I was instrumental in helping identify areas of opportunity and strengths that we have in our system, and then strategies to be able to help support the implementation over the next 5 years. So that's legacy work.
I'm very optimistic in the future of Arlington ISD. With this plan that we're creating, it doubles down that effort, that vision, that collective force that we have in our district to serve our students exceptionally well, so that their success is the success of all of us.
Okay, so that's a very quick snapshot of what took place over several sessions, several days of work. And we were actually going to bring all of see the posters on the walls? We're actually going to bring all those and fill the walls in here, and so you can see all the work that went into all of that, but we didn't do that tonight. But we do still have them, I think, right? I think they're still, yeah. So if anybody wants to review all of those, they're still there. So what resulted then, after looking at all the background and then going into the process of the community engagement, et cetera, was this idea of what are the strategies. And one of the ways that we were really focused in this process was to say, let's not add a lot of things that we don't need. Let's keep this very elegant so we can focus. And so the team ended up with after a long process, ended up with 4 strategies. These are the 4 strategies, and what we're going to do now is essentially go through, and in each team, your team number, you'll analyze the strategy that has the same number as your team and look at its alignment, and then look at it for feedback. And so the protocol is design team member, if you don't mind sharing the process for strategy design with your team, and then we'll go into the strategy alignment Workspace, there's a workspace, and if somebody wants to record there. The alignment pieces that you see, and then also, again, the feedback and considerations. So we're going to, timekeepers, let's see if we can do this see if we can do 10 minutes. You're analyzing the one strategy assigned to your team. Let's go ahead and hear the feedback let's hear from team 1. You're on team 1? Oh, no, okay, sorry. I know you're still 10 years now. We'll hear from team 3. You're on team, what are you on? Team 3. Let's hear, sorry. I was trying not to say team 1 because I knew I was still done here. Team 3, we're going to hear from team 3. What is your feedback? Read your strategy, please, and tell us your feedback.
Okay, so our strategy is we will prioritize the social and emotional well-being of our students, teachers, and staff. And the feedback was very positive on that statement. It indicates that we want students to reach their maximum potential, which includes an investment in their social and emotional well-being, to have well-rounded students, because there's a non-academic aspect to what we do. We need to have a high-performing organizational culture. We need our staff to feel emotionally well so that they can serve students. Active learning can only take place when others are socially and emotionally well. It reflects our current circumstances where schools are asked to step in and take care of a lot of social emotional needs. We like that it's well phrased and concise, and it includes the primary stakeholders that we can directly impact. That's students, teachers, and staff. You could have included some other folks, parents or community members, but realistically, the scope of what we have direct levers on is going to be those 3 stakeholders.
That's great feedback. I know the design team agonizes over every word of these for a long, long time, so they will appreciate your feedback on that and you noticing the intentionality of every word in there. That's great. Very good. So team 4, you want to share your? Read your strategy and also share your feedback.
So, our strategy, we will guarantee every AISD student, staff, and parent has equitable access to all AISD programs and resources. And so, aligning that to the vision, mission, and call to action, basically, if you take our mission to empower and engage all students to be contributing responsible citizens, et cetera, we must provide that equitable access to those programs and supports. So all students actually can achieve that. So, and our feedback piece on that is really, more than anything else, that's where communication is key. Because we have so many offerings right now that are in the district that some perceive as, well, they have that on that side of town, we don't have it over here, or, oh, I didn't know that existed. So there's a lot of communication that needs to be cleaned up.
It's a really good point. And so what we'll want to look for, based on what this team said, is in the specific results, do we see that that's been included, that communication piece has been included because it's so critical to the implementation. So we're going to want to look at the next step, which is basically the action steps you take to make this happen, to see if that's there. Great consideration. Awesome. Team 2, do you want to share your strategy and feedback?
Team 2, our strategy is we will strategically align initiatives to increase focus, increase student achievement, and reduce burnout. One of the considerations we had was moving increased student achievement to come first. So it would read strategic align initiatives to increase student achievement, increase focus, and reduce burnout, just from the fact that students are the priority and student achievement is our #1 goal on everything we do. We had questions on what are the measurables, when we get down to action, how do we measure burnout? Is it retention? What are the different ways you're measuring burnout? Because that can be a difficult thing to track. So we have to make sure we can measure how we're going to be successful in that strategy. And then the last one was a strategy specific to our current context challenge. How does this work? Devil's advocate a little bit. If we return to normalcy, is that still, reduce burnout? How do we stay online and stay in sync with that?
Great. So we'll want to look for measurements. Duly noted the consideration on the switch of the order, the sequence in the strategy, and then we'll want to look at specific results for the measurement piece because, you cannot read anything right now without seeing the shortage and the burnout and everything that's happening, I know everyone that is an educator that's in this room feels it and knows it. And so, right, it might be, to your team's point, it might, hopefully it goes back to normal, and that's not something we have to be concerned about in a few years, but I think it's going to probably take a little while. So 5-year plan, maybe by the end of it, right? Okay, thank you, team 2. Team 1, do you want to share your?
Yes, so our strategy is we will prioritize a high-quality, personalized learning experience for all students founded in the best practices to mitigate and protect against unfinished learning. So some of the bullets was implement best practices in active learning cycle to provide personalized learning for students. Best practices, part of our feedback was to make sure that our teachers are trained in what the best practices are so that they can then teach that way for our students. Now the bullet point, design and implement additional instructional processes, including interventions and enrichment to address unfinished learning for all students to meet grade level expectations and or course standards. And then some of our feedback was basically if we are prioritizing our learning, then it does take us back to our vision of actually being a premier school district. And then finally, provide instructional design support for teachers, including planning and curriculum resources. Once again, providing those resources, that time for training for our teachers, to then be able to make sure that all of our students are great learners.
That's great, awesome. So when we go into specific results, again, you're going to want to look because you guys are thinking, okay, we're going to make this happen. And like they talked about with communication, you got to provide the support. You can't just say, this is the strategy, go to it, right? Which is great. So that's the next step in this process is once we have the strategies, then we went to the create phase where essentially we create specific results that are aligned to each strategy. So now you're getting from strategy to action, essentially. And you'll see that under each strategy, of the 4 strategies, there are a number of specific results, 3, 4-ish, 5, I think under 1. So each strategy has a set number of specific results that came from the design team to say, here's the action. And so you're going to keep the same strategy because you were analyzing that strategy already. Look at the specific results. Again, design team member, if you want to share the idea of how we got there. But then really what you're looking for is this alignment back. And remember, this whole process is backwards design. So it should all align, right? I'll write down the line from things that were created before, like your vision and mission, all the way through to these action steps that are coming up. So these specific results should be aligned to the strategy. You can look for that. You can also then look and see, where do you see evidence of equity? So you're essentially aligning, and then the most important piece of it, you're looking at alignment, and then you're looking at what's the feedback. Is there what feedback do we want to get? So let's make sure we're going to keep this within. We're going to go 9 minutes. This time, timekeepers, 9 minutes, because you're in it. I know you can do this. You're going to look at alignment and then quickly get to feedback and record your feedback. If you will go back to the agenda, we're all going to actually work in the same workspace this time. So you'll take your section, whichever section that is. Yeah, you'll see strategy 2, strategy 1, strategy 3, strategy 4. Find your strategy and fill in the workspace. All right, timekeepers, 9 minutes, go. Okay. Sorry for the mix-up on the 2 different places to get your workspace. I think everyone's on the right one now because just a quick point of process. We're not going to share all of that verbally because there's a lot for each one. But just so that you know, all the feedback from tonight is going back to a steering committee to finalize, incorporate in, and be, so that worked. So we decided to go to the one workspace so that all of that would be in one place. So sorry if that was confusing. Okay, the last piece of this tonight, and this should only take us just a couple minutes, is just really to look at the timeline. Because once we got the specific results in place, then we said, okay, you can't do everything in year 1. You have to spread this out over time, right? And I like how Aaron mentioned earlier. He's like, yes, this thing needs to go in year 4, month 11, like the hardest part. But what we say is that you have to think about, you take the specific results, and then you have to think about a couple parameters. You want to get a quick win so that people have put a lot of work and time into this process, and you want people that have been involved, community, parents, students, and staff to feel like and see, oh, they're doing it. They're implementing the plan that we helped to create, right? So you want to make sure that there's something early on that shows we are implementing this plan. That's one of the things that you want to make sure as you're timelining. Another is you want to make sure that you're kind of balancing the difficult and high-touch specific results over time. You don't want to, slam your staff in year one with everything that's going to, and you're not going to be able to implement it if you do that. So that's some of the advice is, to make sure that no more than 25% of your plan is implemented in year one. Since it is a 5-year plan, you can say 20%, but people are always, interested in getting more than 20% done in year one. So you try to get about 25%, look for a timeline that would reflect a quick win, and then balance. Those are the things that we like to do with the timeline. So there's not a lot here for you to analyze, but you could give some feedback. And I think, Lindsay, we have one. Do we have a workspace for that? Or was that, we were just gonna ask for it? You have a workspace for it? Okay.
So I have a question about
Yes.
So I think everybody would be in complete agreement as far as the low-hanging fruit, the big wins, put things out there. From a budgetary standpoint, how is that looked at, and to disperse it so that we don't have a huge hit up front, or do we need to have a huge hit up front?
Well, it's weird times right now, right? In terms of budget, but the advice is what we call high impact specific results, that they are balanced. And high impact is reflected in two ways. One, that it is a big money investment, and another way is a big time investment. So if it's gonna impact a lot of people in terms of time, then we think about how to balance those, and that's how the team was advised. And then same with money. If it's gonna be a high impact on money, try to balance those over multiple years.
Shannon, one thing I can add to that too is on year one, you'll notice 2.1 is about establishing a system that investigates a return on investment, so that you can prioritize even current district initiatives. There's a lot of conversation specifically around that specific result, with the idea that, with this in mind, which is we have these new things we're adding, and we also have things that we're currently doing. But what we want to understand is, are we being efficient? Meaning, like, are we actually generating results with the dollars we're spending? And how do we know what stuff to take off the plate and what's things to continue? One of the discussion points that we had was, you just can't randomly start picking things off, because if you do that, you might actually be doing things that are doing good. So one of the the specific results that the design team decided to put forward as year one was, let's create a system and a process to analyze those district initiatives up front, so that we can strategically decide which stuff to abandon and which stuff to perpetuate, knowing that there is a fence around the dollars that you can actually spend. Yeah.
There is a workspace in their team folder, Shannon, for feedback and considerations on the time.
Okay, perfect. So if you want to look at the timeline for a few minutes, and in your team folder, so you're going back to your team folder this time to find the workspace, then you can add your feedback and considerations on the timeline itself. So same process. This one probably is a lot quicker because you're not even looking for alignment, you're just literally giving any feedback on the timeline itself. Let's see if we can do this. 4 minutes.
Here's one.
Because if you go to the folder, do the first one? From the folder, right? Absolutely. From the folder. Okay. From the folder. That brings you to the folder. Okay. Because there's one person. Yeah, so I'm looking on the spot. So it's not.
It's like the order, like some of them were so closely related to each other that we're like, before you get to that one, or some of them are so varied that you have to do them all at the same time. So there was a lot of, with the process kind of worked as each team kind of initially established what would be the right order, and then we came together and negotiated with the groups until we went through probably how many iterations? Some iterations. And there was some concessions.
Other things like training, research, and
A lot of teams
had to take this.
Oh my gosh, yes. Especially around year one.
So the why on the grading side was the consideration here. In other words, if you start that at
The other thing we
one or
want to honor
two,
too is their work
there may not be
already
enough.
started, and you can't just take that work and say, oh, that's year 3. Which doesn't make sense to people because they're going
So that's the challenge. That's exactly the challenge, is that how do you measure the
Right, so
consistency?
you're trying to figure out how do you marry those.
So
two
that's
ideas
one, and
and
the
do
other is the weight of the other.
continuation thing, but at the same time, don't make your
That's what was discussed.
going on.
If you add that, that should cut the cost down, right?
And then how does the timeline reflect the balance?
So if you notice on here four,
Specific results.
those items that are on there,
Reactions to the timeline.
there's less.
One other thing I'll point out, you'll notice that it starts to get, like, it starts
Because
to
those
get
other two
heavy, but
things
by
are
the
easy to do more, but they're not as heavy as numbers.
But the year 4 thing, by the way, the year 5 thing is the stuff that's already kind of underway. So
It's going through the cycle.
kind of, yeah. Well, it's not
I think
underway,
it's definitely not.
But that's a good question to add to the
It's like
notes for the committee to
It has
consider.
to be done first before.
If it's
kind
slow,
of thread their way through here, is you're gonna see.
Well, I
things
mean,
like
I was
blood
thinking more in
social
terms of
social
we're
things,
evaluating things.
and then you're gonna see like communication plan, some of the, like grading, like grading.
That is how you have to-
But it has, but it
Every
has.
You have to have a system before we-
It's the foundation.
They're like, where's the grades,
for
right?
providing
You probably thought about it.
So-
And that actually came out in this one, so like, those are some big items that happened toward the end. And that's-
Can I get your attention real quick?
That one probably take a couple-
Sorry to interrupt you, but Team 2 just kind of came to the conclusion that I actually should have said earlier. And that is that when you look at a timeline, it's not a matter of prioritizing, because everything in the plan is a priority. But the goal of timelining is sequencing rather than prioritizing. So like they were just seeing like, this had to happen in year 1 so that this can happen in year 2, right? Like that's the thought process. So I should have mentioned that at the beginning, that we don't think of it as prioritizing. Everything in this plan is a priority, but it's how do you sequence it appropriately, right? For maximum impact over those years, yeah, so, okay. Okay, so a couple more minutes on that, and any feedback, please record in your workspace. Great.
That's an easy win.
And you
So-
want to see if Kathy was already the same.
Thank you for your feedback. Nancy is collecting it back there.
Where are you typing?
Ours is here.
Oh.
I was typing and then it was reconnecting and I was still there, but I'm not connected.
Great feedback.
Okay.
We had a robust
Google
discussion.
Sheets or whatever.
Okay, we had a robust
It's not-
discussion,
it's
but
not
there'll
done.
never be,
But we
Never
have,
be.
we have minds and memories of steel here.
Okay.
Just as them.
He points at all of them.
For communication.
I can tell you what we thought, I didn't think that was the point.
Yeah, are we sharing now or?
No.
Okay.
No, just, for these pieces, it's too much to share out all of them, so, but we are collecting all of it, and we'll have all of that, shared by Ms. Chairman. So, sure, yeah, you can.
It's good, it's perfect.
Oh, great, that's easy feedback, yeah. Way to go, design team, let's give an round of applause to the folks that were on the design team and here tonight. Really appreciate you. Great work. This is not easy work. It is complex, it is deep, it's intense, and you feel exhausted at the end of the day when you do this work and everybody looks at each other and you're like proud of it, but everybody's like, whew, that was hard, right? So, really great. The last thing I'll just say, board members, especially, this is for you, is just, first of all, I know the design team expressed this multiple times, so I'll say it to you, that, and you saw it on the video actually also, but they really appreciated you inviting them into the process. And so, as Board of Trustees, I think that's something that you need to hear. Again, you heard it in the video, but that was expressed over and over, that they just appreciated being invited into the process, to be part of it, from the educators and parents, community members, and students, all of them said that. So, trusting them and inviting them in. So, just to finish tonight, there's that question, okay, so what is your role, board members, in effectively supporting, communicating about, and implementing the strategic plan going forward. And so maybe 30 seconds at your table, and then anybody that wants to share that out. Okay. Does anyone want to share to the whole group something that was shared in your team about the role of the board? Yes.
Ours was that Dr. Cavazos engages in joyous videos constantly. That's homage to
joyous.
That we have been talking about like video vignettes that we would do where we break up different pieces of it, of the plan, and put that out there to the community. Also budgetarily, to make sure that we put our money where our mouths are in supporting it, and that we make sure that our agendas are structured to have constant updates on where we are, how we're doing, and then take that feedback and put that out to the community following those meetings as well.
That's excellent. That's fabulous. So it's communication, budget, and communicating also in the meetings, aligning and focusing to make sure. Yeah, that's fabulous. Doing that.
Yeah, I mentioned, there's a little Harvard Business Review that says if you don't have 75% of people in the entire organization buying a strategic plan, it's going to fail. So as a board, we have to stay focused. I talked to the record. We have to stay focused. I remember early when our first strategic plan in 2013, we used to ask for items on agendas to relate which part of the strategic plan it relates to. So we have to stay focused on that and make sure as a board, we're communicating, here's our plan. Here's the focus going forward. This is not, David said it, a living document. This is something we're going to keep using. We're going to focus. This is not something we just build to check the strategic plan box. This is where we're going, and we have to not only communicate where we're going with it and what it's doing, but make sure, even more importantly, make sure we're not deviating from where we're trying to go.
Love that. There is on your agenda, linked to your agenda for board members specifically, there is what we call the like elevator speech workspace. So you get asked, so what, I hear we're having a new strategic plan, right? You get asked these questions everywhere you go as a board member. And so there is if you want to use that workspace or whatever, take a little time to, you are the ambassadors for everything with the district, but this is that opportunity, like you're both saying, to really focus and help people understand what it's about. And so there is a communication workspace or elevator workspace that you can, if you want to spend a little time just thinking through and jotting down what you think might be that, it's more like a treadmill or grocery store workspace or whatever. It's not that you're always on an elevator with someone, but those times when people get you. So thank you so much for the time tonight. I know that the feedback will be taken back to steering committee, and you should see final products coming to you on time in December, like you said. So, yeah. Thanks to the great work of the district and the design team members that have been part of the process. So,
I just want to thank the members of the committee that were joining us here tonight,
yes.
Especially the teachers and staff. Thank you. Yeah, your voice was very important, and it's important in this process. This is really setting the course for the next 5 years. And so you can be very proud of the fact that you represented very well. And I should talk to everyone. You all represented very well, and I appreciate it very much. So,
I have one question. I know we're wrapping. When you had the community input, was there one or two things that everybody's like, wow, we didn't think of that? Was there anything like that all of us insiders have taken for granted and realized didn't think of? And if so, did that correlate and translate into what we're looking at?
I would ask design team members to answer that. Did y'all see anything
that you thought? Like, oh,
I'll just speak, I don't have anything that comes to my mind that was a big outlier or a big surprise. What I think came mostly out of it was that people were looking for the same things. Whether you're talking to teachers or students, many of the same things, the goals that we were trying to accomplish, they seem to be very similar to each other. There wasn't like, wow, there's this idea that just is pervasive that we hadn't heard, that didn't really come out. It was, that I'm aware of. I don't know if someone else had a different thought.
Well, one thing that, back to that, nothing like that you described, Dr. Rice, but I think what did come out, and it came out consistently, was that we can't ignore the effects of COVID.
Sure.
And while, you know, we were like, hey, this strategic plan and moving forward and, you know, what are the next phases of things, we have to acknowledge that's why Strategy 1 exists, that this has to be a priority. And, you know, that came out over and over, is that we can't just kind of say, okay, well, we'll deal with that later, or it's just gonna deal by itself. So it had to be centered in that. And that's unique to the strategic plan. We have something, a big variable that was already kind of cast in there. And I think the team, the groups, the feedback saw that. The other thing that the students provided, not only in that session, but with us, was their great appreciation for the opportunities and their great desire for different types of learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was consistent and strong. It wasn't critical, it was more consistent of this is what the type of learning we want in our classrooms.
I was
go ahead.
involved in one of the focus groups, and one of the students that spoke on the video, and they were all articulate, very articulate. I was really proud of them, and it was all centered around what Dr. Basso said about happy for all the opportunities to explore their futures and figure out what they like and what they don't like, and very appreciative of that.
And I know we talked about at the beginning of all this process, having the intentionality of those groups across, you know, racial, cultural spectrum, socioeconomic. So I'm assuming that did actually happen. So
Yes.
we heard from everybody.
Yeah, that was really great to see, and that was actually expressed by the people on the team that said, wow, like look around the room, like that we have like diversity of perspective in this room, represented in this room. And the students too, actually, which was really neat. The students said the same. So.
One last big, not last, but another big piece that I think is important as a context is by the teams, both teams design and all that, was to acknowledge that we have things that we're bridging, that this is not a complete, we're starting over.
Right.
And that was, and that's a challenge because we're gonna have to, I think, somehow integrate that into our messaging. For example, just one quick example, all our work on leadership development. It's moving, teacher leadership, et cetera. We can't capture all that in the strategic plan. It's already part of the system. A lot of the work on equity is already moving into the system. And so that's another big challenge for everyone in communicating this, is that this is not like a, hey, we just started over, but capturing what we're doing. A lot of the learning that's already happening, the opportunities and things like that, that we honor that and then also add to it. That's another big context I think is important for everyone.
Yeah, that was
Somebody
proud
had a
of
question.
it.
I just have one quick question. Is there any intentional reason for the number of strategies in the chronological order in which they appear?
No.
Okay.
No, and when people, because when we're going through this process, people say, are we supposed to have a certain number of strategies? The process that we use literally is, here's what we're after, big picture, what is it gonna take to get there? And then we coalesce around however many it takes, and the whole room basically was centered on these 4 things. I mean, it just came out so clear. We had it all up on the wall, and it was like, oh, equity. I mean, it was so clear in the room. There was only 4. I was like, well, these are the 4.
Oh yeah,
clear,
I like
you
the
know?
number. I just
Yeah.
was, while I had you, I wanted
Yeah.
to see if there was any rationale behind how they were numbered.
Oh, no,
Or
not
the
necessarily,
order.
no.
Okay, yeah, the order, yeah.
Yeah. No, and then, of course, as you know, there are, and y'all saw it in the timeline, there are aspects of each strategy in each year.
Right.
So the sequencing of them, you know, they're in each year, so, yeah. Great job. Really good. It's a really good plan, and I think, to Dr. Cavazos' point, the timing really couldn't be better. And the thing that I'll say from a big picture perspective is, I like the fact that a lot of this plan is about, you know, simplify, focus, reduce, align. That is, at this point in time, in this context, that is by far the most effective plan anyone could have. Because if someone thinks they're gonna go in right now and add, you know, all these new strategies and new specific results and get anywhere, they're not thinking straight. So the way that this plan turned out is gonna be very, very effective over the next few years to get to the results that you want, so.
Thank y'all.